The folder was still on the coffee table when Brett walked back in from the kitchen with a second cup of coffee he hadn't asked permission to pour. That detail stayed with me. Not the folder, the coffee. He sat back down across from me, set the mug on the edge of Ellen's good coaster, and said the thing like it was already true. Like the paperwork was a formality, and the only question was when I pick up the pen. It's a family investment, Pops. I wouldn't bring it to you if I wasn't sure. I looked at the folder. I did not touch it. I want to tell you something about that moment, and then I want to back up and tell you everything that led to it. And then I want to tell you how it ended, and I want you to pay attention, because the thing that ended it was sitting in that living room the whole time Brett was talking, and he never once noticed it. Welcome to Real Life Verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every opportunity to behave themselves. They chose differently. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you subscribed. Let's get into it. My name is Norman. I'm 64 years old. I spent 37 years as a credit manager for a regional agricultural equipment distributor. What that means practically is that I reviewed financial packages for farmers and contractors who wanted to borrow six figures to buy tractors and combines and implements on terms. I looked at their numbers. I looked at what the numbers didn't say. I made a recommendation, and that recommendation determined whether those people got the equipment or didn't. I was not guessing. I was reading. After 37 years, those are not the same thing. I retired 18 months ago. Ellen and I live in the same 3-bedroom ranch we bought in 1989, 2 miles outside the county seat. Both daughters are grown. Rachel is 38 and lives in Phoenix with her husband, Brett. Claire is 35 and lives in Minneapolis. They came up differently, those two. Rachel always moved toward the thing that looked like the future. Claire always called first to ask if the thing was solid. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just telling you who they are. I also serve as treasurer for the County Historical Society. I manage a modest endowment, review grant requests, audit receipts, reconcile the accounts quarterly. In the corner of my dining room, there's a 15-year-old Dell desktop that I use for the Society's spreadsheets and my own retirement accounts. The monitor frame is held together with electrical tape because Claire knocked it off the desk in 2019. I keep meaning to replace it. I never do. Brett Culligan married Rachel 6 years ago. Ellen and I helped pay for the wedding. He works in commercial real estate development, or describes himself that way. I have never been entirely clear on the difference between what Brett does and what Brett says he does. He's personable. He laughs easily. He has a way of making a room feel like it's already on his side. He calls me Pops. Not in a bad way, necessarily. In a familiar way. In the way you might call someone Pops if you'd grown up eating at their table, which Brett hadn't. It landed just slightly wrong, every time. Like he was performing a closeness he'd decided we had, rather than one we'd built. I noticed that. I filed it somewhere and didn't make anything of it. The first Sunday in April, Brett and Rachel drove down from Phoenix. They arrived around 1 in the afternoon. Helen made dinner. We ate. Rachel was wearing her grandmother's small gold cross around her neck, the one I'd given her when she graduated high school. She's worn it for 20 years, even though she stopped going to church long before that. Some things people keep just to keep them. I understand that. After Ellen cleared the table, Brett said he wanted to talk to me about something. Just the two of us in the living room. Rachel helped Ellen with the dishes. I noticed that, too. That Rachel stayed in the kitchen. That she did not sit in on the conversation. I'll tell you what Brett told me that meant, and I'll tell you what I thought it meant, and they were not the same thing. Brett pulled out a leather portfolio. Inside it were printed documents, comps, a pro forma, a term sheet from a lender. He laid them on the coffee table between us with the practiced ease of a man who had done this before, or who had practiced it. There was a small industrial flex space near the Phoenix airport, currently 70% leased. Cap rate projected at 8.2%. Purchase price, $920,000. The lender was covering $700,000. The gap was $220,000. That was where I came in. He walked me through the numbers calmly. No rush, no pressure. He talked about the area, the tenant mix, the lease terms. He talked about appreciation projections. He slid the term sheet across the coffee table toward me with one finger and left it there. I let it sit. There is a particular quality to a deal that someone believes in. There's a different quality to a deal that someone needs you to believe in. I have spent a career in the space between those two things. I cannot always tell you what the difference looks like. I can tell you what it feels like. This one felt like the second thing. I asked a few questions. The kind of questions that don't reveal anything but keep the other person talking. Brett answered everything smoothly. He had an answer for everything, which is its own kind of signal. Real deals have gaps. They have the thing you haven't figured out yet. They have the number that's still soft. Brett's answers were all firm. I told him I'd need some time to look it over. He said, of course, no rush. Take all the time I needed. He said it the way you say something you don't mean. Ellen was standing in the doorway of the kitchen when we finished. I don't know how long she'd been there. She watched Brett close the portfolio and stand up, and she watched him go back into the kitchen to find Rachel, and then she looked at me for a moment and didn't say anything. Later that night, after Brett and Rachel had driven back north, Ellen and I sat at the kitchen table. She said, "He sounded like he was selling you something you already owned." I looked at her for a moment. Then I went to bed. The folder was on my dining room desk the next morning. I read through it twice before I touched my coffee. The numbers were there, organized, printed, professional. Cap rate, lease schedule, term structure, all of it was there. But there are numbers that tell you about a deal, and there are numbers that are arranged to make you stop asking about a deal. After 37 years, the difference is not subtle. I had one thing I needed to check. I picked up the phone. I want you to stay with me here. Because what I did next is the part that determined everything that followed, and it was the least dramatic thing I could have done. I called Jim Schaefer. Jim is 59 years old and drives a Subaru Outback with a County Historical Society bumper sticker on the back bumper. I gave him that sticker as a joke 3 years ago, after he donated to the Courthouse Restoration Fund for the 3rd year running. He left the sticker on. I respect that in a person. Jim is a commercial broker. 2 years ago, the Historical Society was trying to get an appraisal done on the old Masonic Lodge building in town, and there was a property tax dispute with the county that was going to hold things up for the better part of a year. I helped Jim navigate it. He did not forget. People like Jim don't. I brought him the folder on April 16th. I did not tell him it was my son-in-law's deal. I told him a family member had asked me to review an opportunity and I wanted a second set of eyes. Jim did not ask why I was being careful. He already knew the answer to that. He knows who I am. He said he'd take a look. 6 days passed. Ellen and I ate dinner. I drove into town for the Historical Society meeting. I fixed the slow drain in the upstairs bathroom. On April 19th, a text came through from Brett. "Hey, Pops, had a chance to look everything over?" I waited 3 hours. Then I typed back, "Still reviewing." Brett did not reply. I want you to think about what that means. A man who needs $220,000 to close a time-sensitive real estate transaction does not go quiet for 3 days after being told his investor is still reviewing. He follows up. He checks in. He sends the additional document he forgot to include in the folder. He calls to make sure the numbers make sense. He does the thing people do when money they need is attached to a decision they cannot control. Brett did nothing. I noted that. I did not say it out loud to anyone. I had one more thing to wait for. Jim Schaefer called on April 22nd at 4:30 in the afternoon. He did not lead with small talk. He said he'd pulled comps for industrial flex space near Phoenix Sky Harbor and made some calls. He said the property Brett had identified was under contract, but not to Brett. It was under contract to a local investor group at $740,000. Brett's term sheet listed the purchase price at $920,000. The difference was $180,000. Jem asked if I wanted him to put his findings in writing. I said yes. I set the phone down on the desk. I looked at the monitor frame held together with electrical tape. I sat there for a moment doing the arithmetic I didn't want to do, arriving at the number I already knew was there. Brett had not asked me to co-invest in a real estate deal. He had asked me to fund the gap between what the deal actually cost and what he told me it cost, and the difference between those two numbers was not an error. Errors don't come with professional-looking folders and practiced answers and a family member kept out of the room. I want you to understand something about me. I've spent my entire working life in a job where people brought me their best case for why they deserved money they didn't have yet. Some of them lied. Not most of them, but enough. And I learned, not quickly but permanently, that the cruelest thing you can do to a liar is let them finish the sentence. Let them get it all the way out. Let them watch you listen. And then be completely still. I was not angry in the way people expect you to be angry. I was not betrayed in the way people expect you to feel betrayed. I was something quieter than that. I was the version of myself that had reviewed 10,000 applications, and I was looking at this one the same way I had looked at all the others. And there was something else, something Brett had not thought to account for. I'll get to that. I want to pause here for a moment because I think some of you watching this know what this feels like. You've been in a room with someone you trusted, someone who used a word like family while they were in the process of treating you like a resource. If that's you, drop a comment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that now. There are people who find this channel exactly when they need it, and the algorithm only shows it to you if you tell it you want it. We're not done with Brett yet. Let's keep going. On April 23rd, I took Jim's written findings and Brett's original folder to a woman named Lorna Pfeiffer. Lorna is 61 years old. She is a solo practitioner who handles estate planning, contract disputes, and the occasional quiet piece of litigation for people who don't want noise. I have known her since she notarized my mother's will in 2003. On her desk, she keeps a ceramic mug that says, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right," which her paralegal gave her as a retirement gag gift when Lorna didn't retire. The mug is accurate. I laid out what had happened, Jim's report, the discrepancy, the folder, the text message, and the silence that followed it. I told Lorna what I wanted. I told her I did not want money from Brett. I did not want a fight. I wanted a legal record, a permanent, public, documented record, that I had never agreed to a loan, never implied I would fund the gap, and owed Brett Culligan nothing. Not then. Not ever. Lorna looked at me across the desk. She said, "You're not trying to get money from him. You're trying to make sure he can't say you owed it to him. I can work with that." She asked if I understood the suit would be public. I said yes. She asked if I understood the suit would be public. I said yes. She asked if I'd thought about what that would mean for Rachel. I said I had thought about it. She asked if I was sure. I told her I was sure. There was one thing she did not ask me about, because I had not told her yet, and because the way it mattered to this case was something I needed to explain carefully. Here is the thing Brett never figured out. He looked at me and saw a retired credit manager from an equipment company who had spent his career in tractors and combines. He saw a man who might know farm loans and might know payment schedules, but who probably did not know the vocabulary of commercial real estate, could not read a cap rate analysis with any confidence, would not know how to verify a purchase price against county records, and would not know who to call in Phoenix. He was wrong about all of it. The skill set is identical. Loan application comes in. You look at the numbers. You check whether the collateral is worth what they say it is. You look at the income they're claiming against the debt they're carrying. You ask whether the thing they want money for is actually the thing they say it is. You call people you trust and you ask them to verify what you cannot verify yourself. I did that for 37 years with equipment, and I know a commercial broker in this county who owes me a favor from a property dispute I helped him navigate, and who pulled the Phoenix comps in 6 days and put it in writing, and who had never heard Brett Culligan's name before I walked into his office. Brett assumed my background was narrow. He assumed family obligation would fill in whatever diligence I lacked. He assumed I would look at the folder and see the effort he had put into it and write a check. He was working with a set of assumptions that were all wrong, and he had no way of knowing that because he had never once asked me a real question about my actual work. Lorna filed the complaint on May 8th. The suit named Brett Culligan as defendant and requested a declaratory judgment, that no loan agreement existed, that no obligation was created, that I owed him nothing. Exhibit A was Jim Schaefer's written report. Exhibit B was Brett's original pitch documents. The process server reached Brett's address in Phoenix on May 11th. Rachel called me on May 19th. Her voice was the voice of someone who has been told one version of a story and is trying to understand why the other person is doing what they're doing. She asked why I was doing this to her family. I told her I was not doing it to her. She said Brett had made a mistake with the numbers, but he hadn't been trying to cheat anyone. I did not argue that point. I said the lawsuit was not about intent. It was about making sure there was no confusion about what I had and had not agreed to. She said this would ruin them. I said nothing. She asked, "You're really going to do this in public?" I said yes. She hung up. Ellen was listening from the kitchen. She did not come to the doorway. She did not ask me if I was sure. She had asked that once, the night before I called Lorna, and I had said yes, and she had not asked again. 41 years teaches you when someone has decided. Brett's attorney filed a motion to dismiss in early June, arguing the suit was premature because no demand for payment had ever been made. Lorna responded with Brett's April 19th text, the timeline of his silence after that, and a brief explaining what declaratory relief is for. The motion was denied. Discovery proceeded. On July 16th, Brett was deposed. Lorna asked how he had arrived at the $920,000 purchase price. Brett said it was based on projected value. Lorna asked if he had known the property was under contract to another buyer at $740,000. Brett said he was not aware of that contract. Lorna asked if he had reviewed the title report before presenting the deal. Brett said he had not. Lorna asked whether he had intended to use any portion of the $220,000 for purposes other than the property purchase. Brett's attorney objected. Brett did not answer. He did not answer. In August, Brett's attorney offered to stipulate to the declaratory judgment in exchange for my agreement not to pursue further claims. Lorna brought me the offer. I asked if agreeing meant Brett admitted to anything. She said no. It just meant he agreed the court could declare I owed him nothing. I declined. I wanted the hearing. I wanted the findings on the record. Not the quiet resolution. The complete one. September 9th, a Monday morning. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:45. Lorna met me in the hallway on the second floor. She had her files in a leather briefcase that looked older than my desktop. Brett was already inside with his attorney, a younger man in a well-fitted suit from a Phoenix firm I didn't recognize. Rachel was not present. Ellen had stayed home. Lorna said the hearing would be short. The judge had already reviewed the briefs. I asked what would happen if Brett tried to speak. She said he wouldn't get the chance unless his attorney called him, and his attorney wouldn't. I nodded. We went in. The room was small, wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the smell of old carpet and legal pads. A judge's bench, elevated just enough to be elevated. A court reporter at her machine. No spectators. This was a civil motion on a Monday morning docket. Nobody was here for the drama. Lorner presented the case in 4 minutes. The pitch, the discrepancy, Jim Schaefer's findings, the request for declaratory judgment. She did not raise her voice. She did not editorialize. She put the documents in order and read the facts from them, and the facts were enough. The judge asked Brett's attorney if he wished to present controverting evidence. Brett's attorney said he did not. The judge asked if Mr. Culligan disputed that the property had been under contract to a different buyer at a different price. Brett's attorney conferred with Brett briefly. Then he said Mr. Culligan did not dispute the facts as presented, but disputed the plaintiff's characterization of his intent. The judge said intent was not relevant to a declaratory judgment action. She granted the motion. The clerk handed Lorna the signed order. I looked at Brett once. He was looking at the table in front of him, at the place where his hands were. Those hands that had slid a folder across my coffee table 5 months ago. Those hands that had held a mug of my coffee while he said, "It's a family investment, Pops. I wouldn't bring it to you if I wasn't sure." He was sure of something, just not the thing he said. I stood when the judge left. I thanked Lorna. She handed me a copy of the signed order and told me she'd file it with the clerk that afternoon. I folded it in half and put it in the inside pocket of my jacket. Brett and his attorney left through the side door without speaking. I walked out through the main hallway. On the first floor, the County Historical Society has a small office where they keep project files and printer supplies. I stopped in and dropped off a check I'd been carrying for a printer repair. It took me 45 seconds. Then I walked out through the front door of the courthouse into the September air. The drive home took 11 minutes. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, listening to the engine tick. A normal sound. A sound from a life that was continuing. Ellen was in the kitchen. She asked how it went. I said, "It's done." She asked how it went. I said, "It's done." She asked if Rachel had called. I said no. She did not ask again. The signed order is in the filing cabinet in the dining room, in the folder behind my retirement account statements. Brett now has a public court record showing that the purchase price he presented was $180,000 more than the actual contract price, that he did not disclose the existence of another buyer, and that his loan request was based on misrepresented facts. That record follows him. Wherever he takes the next folder, to whoever he calls Pops next, that record will be there, if anyone thinks to look. I spent 37 years learning that the numbers always tell you something. What they tell you isn't always what the person presenting them wants you to hear. The job is to know the difference. Brett thought I had retired from that job. I had not.